The stars above Earth had never seemed so hostile. Captain Hyanwu floated in the observation deck of Sentinel-7, watching the blue marble of his home planet rotate slowly below. He had been stationed on this orbital defense platform for 6 months, and every day was the same routine. Check sensors, monitor traffic, file reports. Nothing ever happened up here. That changed in an instant. The alarms screamed through every corridor of the station. Red lights flashed across every screen. Hyanwu rushed to the command center where Lieutenant Hannah was already pulling up the sensor data. Her hands were shaking. "Captain, we have contacts. Multiple contacts." They just appeared out of nowhere. Hyanwu looked at the display and felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of massive ships had materialized in orbit around Earth. They were unlike anything humanity had ever built. Dark metal hulls covered in strange symbols. Weapon ports that glowed with purple energy. These were not human ships. "Try to contact them," Hyanwu ordered. "All frequencies. Tell them we mean no harm," Hannah sent the message. They waited. Seconds felt like hours. Then the alien ships opened fire. Beams of superheated plasma lanced down through the atmosphere. Hyanwu watched in horror as the first strike hit Seoul, the city where his wife Nari and their daughter lived. A brilliant flash of light, then a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. The same thing happened across the planet. New York, Mumbai, Moscow, Cairo. 20 major cities were burning within minutes. Turned fire. Hyanwu screamed, "Launch everything we have." Sentinel-7's missiles streaked toward the alien fleet. They hit the shields of the nearest ship and exploded harmlessly. The aliens didn't even seem to notice. Another ship fired at the station itself. Hyanwu felt the deck lurch beneath his feet as the weapon tore through the hull.
Abandoned station.
Everyone to the escape pods. Hannah grabbed his arm. "Captain, we intercepted their communications. I ran it through the translator. They're calling this an extermination protocol. They've done this before. 2 other species." Hyanwu stared at her. Extermination. They weren't here to invade or conquer. They were here to wipe humanity out. The station shook again. Fires broke out in 3 sections. The crew scrambled for the escape pods, but half of them had been destroyed in the attack. Hyanwu made sure Hannah got into a pod, then climbed into the last one himself. As it ejected from the dying station, he watched Sentinel-7 break apart in a shower of debris and flame. Down on Earth's surface. The nightmare was just beginning. The alien ships, which humanity would later learn belonged to the Dalrith Empire, began landing their ground forces. Massive dropships descended through the smoke and fire, disgorging thousands of soldiers. The Dalrith themselves were terrifying to behold. They stood 3 meters tall, on 6 legs, their bodies covered in crystalline exoskeletons that shimmered in the light. For arms ending in razor-sharp claws, heads like insects with compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. They moved with frightening speed and precision in the ruins of Seoul. A civil engineer named Doyon had survived the initial bombardment by pure luck. He had been inspecting the subway tunnels when the attack came. Now, he emerged from underground to find his city transformed into hell. Buildings were collapsed. Fires raged everywhere. And the aliens were methodically hunting down survivors. Doyon watched from behind a pile of rubble as a Dalrith patrol moved through the street. They were scanning for life signs with handheld devices. When they found someone hiding in a basement, they simply tossed in a grenade. Doyen realized with cold clarity that these aliens weren't taking prisoners. They were exterminating humans like insects. He had to warn others. He had to organize resistance. But first, he had to survive. Far from Earth, in the asteroid belt. Admiral Taiyang received the distress signals with growing dread. He commanded a small fleet of mining ships and defense platforms scattered throughout the belt. These ships were never meant for combat, but now they were all that remained of Earth's space forces. "How many stations did we lose?" he asked his tactical officer. "All of them, sir. Every orbital defense platform is gone. The enemy has complete control of near-Earth space." Taiyang closed his eyes. He had spent 30 years in the defense force, planning for every contingency. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, even terrorist attacks. But an alien invasion that appeared without warning? They had never been prepared for this. "Sir, we should move to defend Earth," one of his captains said. "Our families are down there." "No," Taiyang's voice was hard. "If we go back now, we die. And then Earth has nothing. We stay here. We protect these facilities. The mining stations, the manufacturing platforms, the fusion reactors. If humanity has any chance of fighting back, we need these resources intact." It was the hardest decision he had ever made. Choosing duty over family, choosing the future over the present. But someone had to think beyond the immediate disaster. On Earth, the resistance began almost immediately. Colonel Minho had been conducting training exercises with his Special Forces unit in the mountains when the attack happened. From their remote location, they watched the cities burn. Minho gathered his soldiers and laid out the situation in simple terms. "The aliens think they've won. They think we're beaten. They're wrong. We're going to hit them hard, fast, and we're going to make them bleed for every meter of ground they take." His troops, all veterans of various conflicts, nodded grimly. They had lost everything in the space of an hour. Homes, families, the world they knew. But they still had their training, their weapons, and their anger. The first human counterattack came that night. Minho's team hit a Dalrith supply convoy with rocket launchers and vanished into the forest before the aliens could respond. It was a small victory, barely a pinprick. But it proved something important. The aliens could be hurt. Captain Haianwu's escape pod landed in the Pacific Ocean. He was rescued by a naval vessel that had somehow survived the initial assault. The captain of the ship brought him to the bridge and showed him. Global situation on what remained of the satellite network. The picture was grim. 70% of Earth's major cities were destroyed or under alien occupation. Military forces were scattered and disorganized. Billions were dead or dying. The Dalrith were winning easily. But then Haianwu noticed something. The aliens had completely ignored the facilities in space. The asteroid belt was untouched. The lunar colonies were intact. Admiral Taiyang had saved humanity's industrial capacity. "Get me in contact with the Admiral," Haianwu said. "We still have a chance. Not a good one, but a chance." As night fell on the first day of the invasion, surviving leaders of humanity gathered in hidden bunkers and secure facilities around the world. Secretary General Kuhn, her face covered in dust and blood from the collapse of the UN building, addressed them via encrypted channels. "They attacked us without warning, without mercy. They want to exterminate us. But humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own stupidity. We're not going to let these aliens be the thing that ends us. We're going to fight, and we're going to win." It sounded like bravado, like desperate hope. But deep in those hidden facilities, scientists were already studying what little data they had on the alien technology. Engineers were designing new weapons. Soldiers were planning attacks. And in the cold vacuum of the asteroid belt, factories were beginning to work around the clock. The Dalrith had made a critical mistake. They assumed that destroying Earth's cities meant destroying humanity's will to fight. They had never encountered a species that grew stronger through adversity. They had never fought humans before. High Chancellor Vex, commander of the Dalrith invasion fleet, reviewed the battle reports from his flagship in orbit. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Initial resistance had been crushed. Ground forces were establishing control. Within a standard cycle, this planet would be fully pacified and ready for resource extraction. He marked Earth as conquest number 48 in the Empire's records and moved on to planning the next target. It never occurred to him that the primitive species below might become a threat. After all, they never had before. But somewhere in the ruins of Seoul, Doyon was gathering survivors and planning sabotage. In the mountains, Minho was training civilians to fight. In space, Haianwu and Admiral Taiyang were designing new battle tactics. And in laboratories hidden deep underground, scientists were working on weapons that would make the aliens regret ever finding Earth. The war had just begun, and humanity was done being prey. 3 weeks after the invasion, High Chancellor Vex sent his report to the Dalrith High Council. Earth was 87% pacified. Only scattered resistance remained in remote areas. The planet would be fully under control within days. He believed every word of it. He was completely wrong. Beneath the ruins of Geneva, in a research facility that had somehow survived the bombardment, a scientist named Ji-Wan was working on something that would change the war. She had been studying quantum physics before the invasion, working on theoretical weapons that existed only on paper. Now those theories were becoming reality. "We need to understand how their shields work," she told her team of researchers. They had managed to recover pieces of a crashed Dalrith fighter. Their technology's advanced, but it's not magic. PH. E6 still applies. If we can figure out the frequency of their shield generators, we can build weapons that pass right through them. One of her assistants looked up from a workbench. "Even if we figure it out, we don't have the factories to build these weapons in quantity." He smiled grimly. That's what the asteroid belt is for. In space, Admiral Tai Yang had been busy. The mining facilities and manufacturing stations that he had protected were now working at maximum capacity. But they weren't mining or building civilian equipment anymore. They were making warships. The designs were crude compared to Dalrith technology. Human ships were built fast and cheap, meant to be produced in large numbers. They couldn't match an alien vessel one-on-one. But Tai Yang wasn't planning to fight fair. Captain Hushto, on the bridge of the first new warship, christened the Indomitable. It was barely 200 meters long, nothing compared to the massive Dalrith cruisers. But it was fast, maneuverable, and most importantly, it was human. "How many ships do we have operational?" Haiyan Wu asked. 12, sir, Lieutenant Hannah reported. She had survived the destruction of Sentinel-7 and now served as his tactical officer. Another 30 are under construction. 12 ships against thousands. The odds were insane. But Haiyan Wu had learned something important during the invasion. The Dalrith were predictable. They followed standard tactics because those tactics had always worked before. They expected their enemies to be frightened and disorganized. Humans were neither. On Earth's surface, the resistance had grown from scattered survivors into an organized force. Colonel Minho coordinated operations across 6 continents through a network of hidden radio transmitters. His forces didn't try to hold territory or win battles. They hit fast, killed as many aliens as possible, and disappeared before reinforcements arrived, in the ruins of Buenos Aires. A 19-year-old girl named Sora had discovered she had a talent for hacking. She had managed to tap into the Dalrith communication network using captured equipment. Now she fed them false intelligence, rerouted their supply convoys into ambushes, and generally made their occupation a nightmare. They rely too much on their technology. She explained to the resistance cell she worked with. They think their encrypted communications are secure. They're not. I can read everything they send. The information she provided was invaluable. Minho's forces always seemed to know where the Dalrith would be and when. Ambushes that should have been impossible became routine. The aliens started to get nervous. Doyon, the engineer from Seoul, had his own way of fighting. He knew the city's infrastructure better than anyone. The subway tunnels, the sewer systems, the utility corridors that ran beneath every street. He used that knowledge to turn the ruins into a death trap. When Dalrith patrols entered certain areas, entire buildings would collapse on them. Bridges would explode at precisely the right moment. Underground gas lines would ignite, creating massive fireballs. The aliens couldn't understand how humans could be so effective without advanced technology. They didn't realize that humans had been building and destroying cities for thousands of years. The turning point came when Captain Haiyan Wu's small fleet intercepted a Dalrith supply convoy near Mars. The aliens weren't expecting an attack so far from Earth there. Escorts were minimal, and they were traveling in a predictable pattern.
All ships.
Attack pattern Delta, Haiyan Wu ordered. Fast and aggressive. Don't give them time to react. The 12 human ships came out of hiding behind Mars's moons and accelerated to maximum speed. The Dalrith escorts tried to form a defensive formation. But the human vessels split up, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Hannah coordinated the targeting, focused fire on their weapon ports, disabled their ability to shoot back. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 15 Dalrith ships were destroyed, and 3 more were captured intact. The humans lost 1 destroyer and suffered damage to 3 others. But they had won their first real space battle. High Chancellor Vrex watched the footage of the battle with growing concern. The humans were learning, adapting, improving. He had conquered 47 species before. None of them had recovered from the initial invasion this quickly. "Send for reinforcements," he ordered. "These humans are more dangerous than we anticipated." Back in Geneva, Guiwan received the captured ships and immediately began tearing them apart. Every piece of technology was studied, analyzed, and reverse-engineered. Within 2 weeks, human scientists understood Dalrith shield generators. Within 4 weeks, it designed weapons that could defeat them. The quantum disruption torpedo was humanity's first truly advanced weapon. It phased through normal matter using the same principles as the Dalrith shields, then exploded inside the target. There was no defense against it because the shields couldn't stop something that operated on the same quantum frequency. Admiral Tai Yang ordered the new weapons. Installed on every ship in the growing fleet, production was accelerated. The asteroid belt factories worked around the clock, staffed by volunteers who slept in shifts and lived on stimulants and determination on Earth. Hien Wu's wife, Nari, had not only survived the Seoul bombardment, but had become a leader in her own right. She commanded a resistance cell of 200 fighters, mostly civilians, who had lost everything and wanted revenge. Her group specialized in capturing Dalrith. Officers alive, the information they extracted through interrogation was brutally effective. Humans learned about Dalrith tactics, their command structure, their weaknesses. Every captured officer revealed more about the enemy, and every piece of information made the resistance more deadly. For months after the invasion began, Secretary General Kuhn emerged from her hidden bunker to make a broadcast. It wasn't sent to humanity alone. Using captured Dalrith communication equipment, Sora made sure the message reached every corner of the galaxy. Kyung stood before the cameras, her face scarred from the bombing, but her eyes burning with determination. Behind her stood representatives of every surviving nation on Earth. They were battered, exhausted, but unbowed. To the Dalrith Empire, and all who hear this message, the Dalrith attacked Earth without provocation, without warning, without mercy. They believed we would break. They believed we would surrender. They believed we were weak. She paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. As of this moment, humanity formally declares war on the Dalrith Empire. We will not negotiate. We will not compromise. We will fight until they are defeated or we are extinct. And we will not fight alone. We call upon all species who have suffered under Dalrith's aggression to join us. Together, we will end their tyranny. The message reached the Galactic Council, a loose federation of advanced species that had maintained an uneasy peace with the Dalrith for centuries. Most assumed it was a desperate bluff from a dying species. But some listened more carefully. 3 species sent quiet messages of support. The Kelver, the Rishons, and the Thorn had all been threatened by the Dalrith in the past. They couldn't offer military aid openly, but they could provide intelligence. Star charts. Information about Dalrith technology and tactics. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Admiral Tai Yang used that information to plan humanity's first real offensive. Not a raid or an ambush, but a full-scale attack, designed to liberate Earth's orbit. 200 human ships, every vessel they could muster. Prepared for battle, Captain Hien Wu stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the fleet gathered. He thought about his wife and daughter down on Earth, about the billions who had died in the first attack, about every human who had suffered under Dalrith occupation. "This is it," he said to Hannah. "We win here, or we lose everything." "We'll win," she replied with absolute certainty. "We're human. We don't know how to quit." The fleet moved toward Earth. The Dalrith orbital forces, confident in their superiority, moved to intercept. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. They had superior technology. They had more experience, but they had never fought an enemy that learned from every mistake and adapted with frightening speed. They had never fought an enemy that turned weakness into strength through sheer determination. They had never fought humanity. The battle began at the edge of Earth's gravity well. Human ships came in fast and scattered, refusing to present a unified target. They used the quantum disruption torpedoes that Guan had designed, and watched Dalrith's shields fail for the first time. Minho's ground forces, coordinated by Sora's intelligence, launched simultaneous attacks on every Dalrith position on Earth. The aliens found themselves fighting on two fronts at once. Unable to reinforce either position effectively, Doyan triggered his greatest trap yet. Beneath the largest Dalrith command base in Seoul, he had spent weeks planting explosives in the old subway tunnels. When he detonated them, the entire complex collapsed into the Earth, taking 3,000 alien soldiers with it. In space, Huanwu's fleet was suffering casualties, but they were inflicting them at a greater rate. For every human ship destroyed, 2 Dalrith vessels were disabled or destroyed. The aliens' numerical advantage was evaporating. High Chancellor Vex, watching his carefully planned occupation fall apart, made a desperate decision. He ordered his remaining ships to bombard Earth's surface indiscriminately. If he couldn't hold the planet, he would deny it to the humans. But Admiral Taiyang had anticipated this. The moment Dalrith's ships turned their weapons toward Earth, every human vessel concentrated fire on them. It was a race against time. Could they destroy the enemy fleet before the planet was devastated? The answer came from an unexpected source. Nari's resistance cell had infiltrated the main Dalrith command center on the surface. Using explosives and captured weapons, they fought their way to the communication hub. Sora, guiding them remotely, showed them how to access the system. Nari transmitted a single command to every Dalrith ship in orbit, a shutdown code that Sora had discovered buried in their own systems. It wouldn't work for long, but it didn't need to. For 30 seconds, every Dalrith vessel went dark. Their shields dropped. Their weapons powered down. Their engines cut out. It was all the time humanity needed. The quantum torpedoes found their targets. The Dalrith fleet died in fire and silence. When it was over, Earth's orbit was clear for the first time in 4 months. The surviving human ships, barely 100 of them, formed up around their battered planet. On the surface, resistance fighters emerged from hiding to find alien forces in full retreat. The war was far from over. The Dalrith Empire still had millions of ships across dozens of star systems, but they had lost Earth, and in doing so, they had created something that would haunt them. They had created an enemy that would never stop, never surrender, and never forgive. Humanity had declared war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news of Earth's liberation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council, which had dismissed humanity as another species destined for extinction, suddenly paid attention. The Dalrith Empire, which had never lost a conquered world, scrambled to understand what had happened. High Chancellor Vrex had barely escaped Earth with his life. He stood before the Dalrith High Council, trying to explain the impossible. The Emperor himself, ancient and terrible, listened with growing fury. "You lost to primitives," the Emperor said, his voice like grinding stone. "Species that had barely reached their own moon. Species with no knowledge of slipspace, travel, or energy shields. How is this possible?" Vrex had no good answer. "They adapt faster than any species we have encountered. They learn from every encounter, and they fight with a ferocity that defies logic. They do not surrender even when surrender would be rational." The Emperor's compound eyes fixed on Vrex with cold calculation. "Then we will teach them the price of resistance. Mobilize the home fleet. We will crush them so thoroughly that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 generations what happens to species that defy the Dalrith Empire." Back on Earth, humanity was not celebrating. They were preparing. Secretary General Kyung met with Admiral Taiyang and the other military leaders in what remained of the UN building. The room was scorched and damaged, but they refused to meet anywhere else. This was where the government of Earth belonged. The Dalrith will come back, Kyung said. With more ships, more weapons. They cannot afford to let us survive. We represent an existential threat to their empire. Good, Colonel Minho replied. Let them come. We'll be ready. But Admiral Tai Yang shook his head. Defense is not enough. We liberated Earth, but barely. If the Dalrith commit their full fleet, we will lose. Our only chance is to take the fight to them. Keep them off balance. Make them defend their own territory. Guan, the physicist, had been working non-stop since the liberation. She looked exhausted, but her eyes burned with purpose. I have designs for a new type of ship. Bigger, more powerful. Something that can match their capital ships. But I need time and resources. You'll have both, Kyung promised. Whatever you need. In the asteroid belt, construction accelerated to a pace that seemed impossible. New facilities were built. More workers volunteered. The shipyards that had produced 200 vessels in 4 months would produce 1,000 in the next 4. Humanity was transforming from a planetary species into something more. Something dangerous. Captain Hyenwoo had been promoted to fleet captain, commanding a battle group of 50 ships. His reputation from the Battle of Earth had made him a hero, though he didn't feel like one. Too many people had died. Too many ships had been lost. But he understood what Admiral Tai Yang was planning, and he agreed with it completely. We're going to hit them where they live, Tai Yang explained at the strategy meeting. Their colonies, their supply lines, their sense of security. We're going to teach them what humans do to those who attack our home. The first target was carefully chosen. Vraxis Prime, a Dalrith colony world in the Outer Territories. It was lightly defended because the Dalrith had never needed heavy defenses. No one had ever attacked their territory before. That was about to change. Hyenwoo's battle group, reinforced with newly constructed ships equipped with Jiwan's latest weapons, jumped into the Vraxis system without warning. The small garrison fleet tried to defend the planet, but they were overwhelmed in minutes. The new quantum torpedoes tore through their shields like paper. Then came the hard part. The part that would haunt Hyenwoo for the rest of his life. Lieutenant Hannah pulled up the tactical display. Sir, there are 50 million Dalrith civilians on the surface. Mostly support personnel for their mining operations. What are our orders? Every eye in the command center turned to Hyenwoo. This was the moment where they would define what humanity would become. Would they be better than the Dalrith, or would they become exactly like their enemy? Hyenwoo thought about Seoul, about the billions of civilians the Dalrith had killed without hesitation. About his daughter who had died in the first bombardment while he watched helplessly from orbit. The rage inside him wanted revenge. Wanted to show the Dalrith exactly what they had done to Earth. Glassing protocols, he said quietly. Target all major population centers. The weapons fired. Vraxis Prime burned. When it was over, the planet's surface was a radioactive wasteland. 50 million Dalrith were dead. And humanity had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The galaxy reacted with horror. The Galactic Council condemned the attack as a war crime. Multiple species called for sanctions against Earth, but Secretary General Kyung's response was cold and unapologetic. The Dalrith showed us no mercy. They will receive none from us. Every Dalrith world we destroy is one fewer that can support their war machine. This is total war. This is what they chose when they attacked Earth. Not everyone on Earth agreed. Nari, who had fought so hard to liberate Seoul, was horrified when she learned what Hyenwoo had done. She sent him a message through the military network. It was short and devastating. Is this what we've become? Are we no better than them? Hyenwoo didn't reply. He couldn't, because he didn't know the answer. But the attacks continued. A former merchant captain named Minjin, who had lost his entire family in the invasion, led a squadron of fast attack ships into Dalrith territory. His mission was simple. Destroy everything. Make them afraid to sleep at night. His ships hit colony after colony, supply depot after supply depot. They didn't discriminate between military and civilian targets. In Minjin's mind, there were no innocent Dalrith. They were all complicit in the attack on Earth. The Dalrith Empire, for the first time in its history, knew fear. Their outer colonies were being systematically destroyed. Their supply lines were under constant attack. And worst of all, humanity was getting stronger. Every battle made them more experienced. Every captured ship gave them more technology to study and improve. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Soman, one of the few Earth diplomats to survive the invasion, stood before the assembled species. They looked at her with a mixture of fear and disgust. "You have become monsters," the Kelver representative said. "You destroy entire worlds. You show no mercy. How are you different from the Dalrith?" Soman's response was measured but firm. "We are different because we did not start this war. We did not attack without provocation. When the Dalrith burned our cities and killed our children, where was the Galactic Council? Where was the outrage? Where was the intervention?" The council chamber fell silent. "You watched us suffer and did nothing because it was convenient. Because the Dalrith were powerful and we were weak. Now we are strong, and suddenly you care about morality and laws. We will follow your laws when you enforce them equally. Until then, we will do whatever is necessary to survive." 3 species, the Kelver, Ryshans, and Thorn, approached Soman privately after the session. They offered more than intelligence now. They offered ships, weapons, supplies, not because they loved humanity, but because they feared what would happen if the Dalrith won. "If the Dalrith crush you," the Kelver admiral explained, "they will be unstoppable. Your species has done what we could never do. You have shown them they are not invincible. For that alone, you deserve support." Meanwhile, Jiwan had completed her masterpiece. The Vengeance was 3 kilometers long, the largest warship humanity had ever built. It was powered by a quantum singularity core that bent the laws of physics. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets, and it was commanded by Captain Hyenwu, who had proven himself the most effective ship captain in human history. The Vengeance and its escort fleet of 200 ships began raiding deeper into Dalrith territory. They hit military installations, destroyed shipyards, and generally made the Empire's life miserable. The Dalrith couldn't catch them because human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They couldn't predict where the humans would strike next because Sora, still operating from Earth, fed false intelligence into their networks. The war had been going on for 8 months now. Earth's cities were being rebuilt. The population was slowly recovering, but the scars ran deep. Every human had lost someone in the invasion. Every human carried rage that wouldn't fade. Doyen, the engineer, had become the architect of Earth's new defenses. He designed orbital platforms that could destroy entire fleets. He created ground-based weapons that could fire into space. He turned Earth into a fortress that could never be taken again. Colonel Minho trained a new generation of soldiers. Young people who had lost their families and wanted to fight. He taught them everything he knew about warfare, guerrilla tactics, and survival. They would form the core of humanity's ground forces as the war expanded. The Dalrith Empire, meanwhile, was fracturing. The Emperor's authority was being questioned for the first time in millennia. Several outer provinces were refusing to send troops to fight humanity, fearing they would be the next targets. The economy was strained by constant warfare, and morale was collapsing as humans destroyed fleet after fleet. High Chancellor Vrex, you're demoted and disgraced, watched from a remote outpost as his empire crumbled. He had spent his entire life in service to the Dalrith. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had believed in the superiority of his species above all others. Now he understood the truth. The humans weren't special because they were stronger or smarter. They were special because they refused to accept defeat, because they would burn the galaxy to ashes before they surrendered, because they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The Dalrith Emperor, in his palace on the homeworld of Dalrithos, made a decision that would define the final phase of the war. He would mobilize the entire home fleet, 200,000 ships, the full military might of the Empire, would be sent to Earth. Humanity would be crushed once and for all, but he underestimated humanity one final time. Admiral Taiyang had been waiting for this. He had been preparing for it, and he had a plan that would either save Earth or doom it forever. Captain Hyenwu, received his orders aboard the Vengeance. He read them twice to make sure he understood. Then he turned to Hannah and smiled grimly. We're going to attack their homeworld. We're going to force them to commit everything to one battle. And we're going to end this war one way or another. Hannah looked at the odds displayed on her screen. 1,000 human and allied ships against 200,000 Dalrith vessels. It was suicide. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of plan that might actually work. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow, Hyen-Woo replied. We end this tomorrow. The word spread through the human fleet, through the resistance cells on Earth, through every survivor who had lost someone in the invasion. Tomorrow, they would strike at the heart of the Dalrith Empire. Tomorrow, they would risk everything. Tomorrow, they would show the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. The jump to slipspace felt different this time. Captain Hyen-Woo stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as reality twisted around them. Behind his flagship, 999 human ships made the same jump, and behind them, hidden in the fold of space, 50,000 allied vessels from the Kelver Rishians. And Thorn waited for their moment. Lieutenant Hannah monitored the sensors as they emerged at the edge of the Dalrithos system. The Dalrith homeworld hung in space like a jewel, surrounded by a defensive fleet that blotted out the stars. 200,000 ships. The entire military might of an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years. Sir, they're hailing us, Hannah reported. It's the Emperor himself. Hyen-Woo nodded. Put him on screen. The Emperor of the Dalrith appeared before them. He was ancient beyond measure, his crystalline exoskeleton marked with symbols of countless victories. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of millennia. You have come here to die, humans. You cannot win. Surrender now, and I will grant your species a quick end. Resist, and I will make your extinction last for generations. Hyen-Woo smiled without humor. You attacked our world without warning. You killed billions of our people. You expected us to break. Instead, we followed you here. Now we're going to show you what happens when you attack humanity. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships, battle formation Alpha. No retreat. No surrender. We end this today. The human fleet accelerated toward the massive Dalrith armada. It looked like suicide. 1,000 ships against 200,000. But Admiral Tai Yang's plan was more complex than a simple frontal assault. As the human ships closed to weapons range, they split into dozens of smaller groups. Each group had a specific target. Command ships. Supply vessels. The massive dreadnoughts that formed the backbone of the Dalrith fleet. The humans weren't trying to destroy the entire fleet. They were trying to cut off its head. The quantum torpedoes, Ji-Won's masterpiece, streaked through space. They phased through shields and armor, exploding inside the target ships. Dalrith vessels that had withstood attacks from entire fleets died in seconds. The aliens' numerical advantage meant nothing when their defenses were useless. But the Dalrith were not helpless. They had numbers, and they had experience. For every human ship that slipped through their defenses, 2 more were destroyed by massed fire. The space around Dalrithos became a graveyard, filled with debris from both sides. On the Vengeance, Hyen-Woo watched the battle display with cold precision. He had learned to calculate death in numbers. How many ships he could afford to lose. How many enemy vessels needed to be destroyed? It was a horrible mathematics, but it was necessary. Hannah's status on the primary weapon? Charged and ready, sir. But if we fire it here, we'll destroy half our own fleet along with theirs. No. Hold fire until I give the order. Far behind the battle lines aboard the Allied fleet, the Kelver Admiral watched the carnage with amazement. The humans were actually holding their own against impossible odds. Their tactics were chaotic, unpredictable, and frighteningly effective. They fight like they have nothing to lose, his tactical officer observed. They don't, the Admiral replied. The Dalrith made sure of that when they attacked Earth. Now send the signal. It's time. The 50,000 Allied ships decloaked and charged into battle. The Dalrith fleet, already engaged with the human forces, suddenly found themselves surrounded. The tide of battle shifted in an instant. The Emperor, watching from his orbital fortress, felt something he had not experienced in 1,000 years. Fear. His fleet was dying. His empire was collapsing. And it was all because of one primitive species that refused to accept defeat. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, another drama was unfolding. Commander Yuna, left in charge of Earth's defense, stared at the sensor display in disbelief. 20 massive ships had just emerged from slipspace. Dalrith planet killers, each capable of cracking a world's crust. How did they get here without us detecting them? One of her officers asked. Evacuate all remaining civilians to the underground bunkers. Activate the planetary shield, and prepare to fire everything we have. But Yuna had been preparing for this exact scenario. While the main fleet was away, Earth had not been idle. Doyen's engineering teams had transformed Luna into something unprecedented. The moon's surface was covered in weapon emplacements, all hidden until this moment. The Dalrith planet killers fired their weapons at Earth. Massive beams of energy lanced toward the blue planet. But the planetary shield, powered by every fusion reactor in the system, held. The beams splashed across it like water against glass. Then Luna opened fire. Hundreds of weapon platforms emerged from hidden bays. Railguns that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missile batteries that filled space with explosives. And at the poles, 2 massive beam weapons that Jiwan had designed before leaving for the Dalrithos offensive. The Dalrithos died in the opening salvo. Their shields, designed to destroy planets, were useless against weapons designed specifically to kill them. Within 10 minutes, all 20 ships were debris. Yuna allowed herself a small smile. Send a message to Admiral Taiyang. Earth is secure. Tell him to finish them. At Dalrithos, the battle had been raging for 3 hours. The human fleet was down to 600 ships. The Allied fleet had lost 20,000 vessels, but the Dalrith fleet was in ruins. Of the 200,000 ships that had started the battle, fewer than 50,000 remained operational. Captain Heianwu saw his moment. The Emperor's orbital fortress, massive and supposedly impregnable, was exposed. Its escort fleet had been pulled away to deal with the Allied forces. It was vulnerable. All ships concentrate fire on the fortress. Hannah charged the Reaper beam. The Vengeance turned toward its target. Every other human ship still capable of fighting did the same. They poured fire into the fortress's shields, overwhelming them through sheer determination. Then Heianwu gave the order. Fire. The Reaper beam, powered by a contained singularity, tore through space itself. It hit the fortress dead center and simply erased it from existence. The Emperor, thousands of his guards, the command center of the Dalrith Empire, vanished in a flash of light. The remaining Dalrith fleet stopped fighting. Without the Emperor, without central command, they didn't know what to do. They had never lost before. They had never faced an enemy that could kill their immortal ruler. Admiral Taiyang's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. All Dalrith vessels, this is Admiral Taiyang of the United Earth Defense Force. Your Emperor is dead. Your fleet is broken. You have 2 choices. Surrender and live, or continue fighting and die. You have 60 seconds to decide. The silence stretched. Then, one by one, the Dalrith ships powered down their weapons. They had chosen survival, but the war wasn't over. Deep inside the Dalrithos orbital complex, something was happening. Sensors detected massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. Heianwu realized with horror what the Emperor had done before he died. He activated the planetary self-destruct. The entire world is going to explode and take us all with it. Hannah pulled up the calculations. We have 30 minutes before the reaction becomes irreversible. Sir, we need to evacuate. There's nothing we can do. But down on the planet's surface, Colonel Minho had led a team of ground troops as part of a diversion tactic. They had landed hours ago, fighting through Dalrith's defenses to reach strategic targets. Now they were trapped on a planet that was about to become a star. Minho's voice came through the communications. Captain, we've reached the civilian shelters. There are 3 million Dalrith down here, mostly families, Children? Non-combatants? Haiyan Wu closed his eyes. This was the choice he had been dreading since Viraxis Prime. Save the enemy, or save his people. Show mercy, or show strength. Become better than the Dalrith, or become exactly like them. Every tactical advisor urged retreat. They had one. Earth was safe. The Dalrith Empire was broken. There was no reason to risk lives for enemy civilians. But Haiyan Wu thought about Nari's message, about whether humanity had become monsters. How many troops do you have with you? 300, sir. We can get maybe half the civilians to the transport ships if we move fast. 300 soldiers to save 3 million aliens. Or 300 soldiers who could escape and live. The mathematics of death again, but different this time. This time, the choice defined who humanity would be after the war ended. Admiral Taiyang's voice cut through the debate. All ships, begin rescue operations. Save everyone you can, human and Dalrith alike. That's an order. Secretary General Kyung, monitoring from Earth, supported the decision immediately. The Emperor wanted to take us with him. Wanted to make us choose between revenge and mercy. We choose mercy. Show the galaxy who we really are. The human fleet, battered and exhausted, turned toward the planet. They didn't have enough ships to save everyone. They didn't have enough time. But they tried anyway. Minho's troops herded Dalrith civilians into transport vessels. Nari, who had insisted on joining the ground assault despite Haiyan Wu's protests, coordinated the evacuation with calm efficiency. Doyun, who had come along to disable planetary defenses, now used his engineering expertise to slow the self-destruct sequence. It wasn't enough. When the countdown reached 0, 2 million Dalrith had been evacuated. 1 million remained, along with 200 human soldiers who had stayed behind to help until the last possible moment. Dalrithos exploded. The planet became a temporary star, consuming everything on its surface and everything in near orbit. 100 human ships that had stayed too long, trying to save civilians, died in the blast. The surviving human fleet regrouped at the edge of the system. 600 ships had entered the battle. 231 made it out. The Allied fleet had lost 30,000 vessels. But they had one. The Dalrith Empire, which had ruled for 3 millennia, was finished. Without the Emperor, without the home fleet, the outer provinces declared independence. Species that had been conquered generations ago rose up in rebellion. The galaxy's greatest empire collapsed in a matter of weeks, Captain. Haiyan Wu sat in his command chair aboard the battered Vengeance and thought about the cost. Millions dead on both sides. Worlds destroyed. An empire fallen. All because the Dalrith had attacked one primitive planet, without bothering to understand what they were facing. Hannah approached him quietly. Sir, message from Earth. Your wife made it back safely. She's being treated for minor injuries, but she'll be fine. Haiyan Wu nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Nari was alive. Earth was safe. The war was won. But the price had been so high that victory felt hollow. Get me a channel to the fleet, he said finally. All ships. When the connection was established, he spoke with a voice that carried the weight of everything they had been through. This is Captain Haiyan Wu. The war is over. We won. But we lost so much in the process. Remember that. Remember the cost. And make sure that when we rebuild, when we go out into the galaxy, we never become the thing we fought against. We are human. That means something. That has to mean something. The fleet acknowledged his words in silence. They had defeated an empire. But they had also learned what it cost to become monsters. Now they had to figure out how to be human again. 6 months after the Battle of Dalrithos, Earth looked almost normal again. The cities were being rebuilt with a mixture of human and captured Dalrith technology. The orbital stations were operational. Life was slowly returning to something that resembled peace. But the scars remained, both physical and emotional. Captain Haiyan Wu stood in his apartment in rebuilt Seoul, looking out at the city he had grown up in. It looked similar to what he remembered, but different. Newer, harder, more defensive. Humanity had learned that the universe was dangerous, and the lesson would never be forgotten. His wife Nari entered the room quietly. She moved with a slight limp now, a reminder of the injuries she had sustained during the evacuation of Dalrithos. But she was alive, and that was more than millions of others could say. "You've been standing there for an hour?" she said softly. "What are you thinking about?" "Vorox's Prime," he replied. "The 50 million we killed. I keep wondering if there was another way. If I could have made a different choice." Nari joined him at the window. "We can't change the past. We can only learn from it and try to be better. You chose mercy at Dalrithos when you could have chosen revenge. That matters, does it? Does it balance out?" She took his hand. "I don't know. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to carry that weight. To remember what we're capable of, both good and bad." Across the city, in a government building that still smelled of fresh construction, Secretary General Kyung met with the Galactic Council representatives. They had come to Earth for the first time. Wanting to see the species that had defeated the Dalrith Empire with their own eyes, the Kelver ambassador spoke first. "Your application for council membership has been approved. Humanity will be granted full status, including voting rights and protection under galactic law." "And the war crimes charges?" Kyung asked directly. "My people destroyed multiple Dalrith worlds, killed billions of civilians. Are we to be held accountable?" The ambassador shifted uncomfortably. "The council has voted to grant amnesty for actions taken during the war. Both sides committed atrocities. Pursuing justice would require prosecuting everyone, and that would accomplish nothing." Kyung nodded slowly. "Convenient. But I suppose that's politics. We accept the membership. But understand this clearly. If any species attacks Earth again, we will respond with everything we have. We will not show restraint. We will not worry about galactic opinion. We will defend ourselves by any means necessary." The threat hung in the air. The council representatives understood that humanity meant every word. They had seen what humans could do when threatened. The galaxy would think twice before attacking Earth again. Admiral Taiyang retired from military service. He had spent 30 years in defense of Earth, and the last year had aged him more than all the previous years combined. He gave his final speech to the assembled fleet, now numbering over 5,000 ships. "We built this fleet to defend our home. We succeeded. But now we have a responsibility to the galaxy. There are other species out there like the Dalrith, empires that prey on the weak, pirates that raid colonies. We have the power to stop them. The question is, should we?" He paused, looking at the faces of the officers and crew who had fought beside him. "I believe we should. Not as conquerors. Not as empire builders. But as defenders. When someone calls for help, we answer. When someone is threatened, we protect them. We become what we needed when the Dalrith attacked us. We become the shield that stands between the innocent and those who would harm them." The fleet adopted his vision. The United Earth Defense Force became the United Earth Peacekeeping Force. Their mission expanded beyond defending Seoul to maintaining peace across multiple sectors. Not everyone approved of this decision, but most understood the necessity. Giwan continued her research in Geneva, now one of the most respected scientists in known space. She had been offered positions on a dozen worlds, but she refused to leave Earth. Her latest project was not a weapon, but a gift. A slip-space communication system that would allow instantaneous communication across the galaxy. No more delays. No more isolation. When she unveiled it to the scientific community, the response was overwhelming. Dozens of species wanted the technology. Giwan gave it away freely, refusing payment or exclusive rights. "Knowledge should be shared," she said simply. The Dalrith hoarded their technology, used it to maintain dominance. We will be different. Colonel Minho found himself in an unexpected position. He was appointed as humanity's liaison to the former Dalrith territories. His job was to help the newly independent species establish stable governments and defend themselves against those who would fill the power vacuum left by the Empire's fall. He approached the work with the same intensity he had brought to warfare. But now, instead of destroying, he was building, teaching, helping. It was harder than fighting had been, but more satisfying. On one of his visits to a former colony world, he met with a group of young Dalrith who had lost their families in the war. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "And why do you help us?" one of them asked. "We are the enemy. We destroyed your world." Minho considered his answer carefully. "Your leaders destroyed our world. You were just trying to survive. And now, you need help." "That's enough." The young Dalrith didn't seem convinced, but they accepted his answer. It was a start. Sora, the young hacker who had played such a crucial role in the war, found herself at the center of Earth's intelligence network. At 20 years old, she was one of the most powerful people in the government. She hated it. "I just wanted to protect my home," she told Kyung during a meeting. "Now I'm spying on half the galaxy. This isn't what I signed up for." "None of us signed up for this," Kyung replied. "But here we are. You have skills that humanity needs. The question is, how will you use them?" Sora thought about that for a long time. Eventually, she decided to create an organization dedicated to monitoring for threats to all species, not just humanity. If another empire like the Dalrith arose, the galaxy would have warning. No more surprise attacks. No more genocides. Doyen returned to engineering, but his focus had changed. Instead of weapons and defenses, he designed habitats and cities. He helped terraform Mars, making it suitable for human colonization. He worked with alien species to improve their infrastructure. His talent for destruction became a talent for creation. "I spent a year figuring out how to kill people efficiently," he explained to a group of students. "Now I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to help them live better. It's the least I can do." Ambassador Soman became Earth's primary representative to the Galactic Council. She was frank, often brutally honest, and completely unwilling to play diplomatic games. The other species found her refreshing after dealing with politicians, who spoke in careful euphemisms when the Council tried to pass restrictions on human military expansion. She shut down the debate immediately. "You want us to limit our defenses? After what happened? No. Earth will maintain whatever military force we deem necessary. If that makes you uncomfortable, I suggest you remember why we built these ships in the first place." The restrictions were withdrawn. Minjin, the former merchant captain who had led the devastating raids on Dalrith colonies, struggled more than most to adjust to peace. He had lost everyone in the invasion: his wife, his children, his parents. The rage that had sustained him during the war had nowhere to go now. He spent months in isolation, unable to face the peace he had fought for. Eventually, Nari found him living in a small apartment in Buenos Aires, drinking too much and seeing no one. "Come work with me," she said. "I'm helping war orphans, both human and alien. We're building facilities, providing education, giving them a future. I need help." "Why would you want me?" Minjin asked bitterly. "I'm good at killing, not helping, because you understand loss. Because you know what it's like to have everything taken away. These kids need someone who gets it." Minjin joined her program. It was harder than fighting had been. Looking into the eyes of children who had lost everything, human and alien alike, and trying to give them hope. But slowly, it helped him heal. Captain Hyan Wu was offered command of Earth's newest ship, a massive vessel that made the Vengeance look small. He turned it down. "I've spent enough time in space," he told Admiral Taiyang. "I want to be with my family, to rebuild what we lost." Instead, he took a position training the next generation of ship captains. He taught them tactics and strategy, but more importantly, he taught them judgment. When to fight and when to show mercy. When to be ruthless and when to be compassionate. "The hardest part of command isn't winning battles," he told his students. "It's making choices that you'll have to live with forever. Every decision has a cost. Make sure you're willing to pay it." Lieutenant Hannah, his former tactical officer, took command of the new flagship. She named it the Remembrance, after all those who had died in the war. Under her leadership, it became the guardian of Earth's new colonies, and the first responder when other species called for help. 1 year after the war ended, Earth held a memorial service for the 47 million humans who had died in the Dalrith attack. Representatives from across the galaxy attended, including several Dalrith who had survived the fall of their empire. Secretary General Kuhn gave the keynote address. She stood before the massive wall of names, each one representing a life cut short. We remember them. The civilians who died without warning, the soldiers who fought to protect our home, the workers who built our ships, the scientists who created our weapons, the ordinary people who became heroes because they had no choice. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. The Dalrith attack changed us forever. We learned that the universe is dangerous, that peace is fragile, that evil exists, and sometimes the only answer is to fight back with everything you have. We learned to be hard, to be ruthless, to do terrible things in the name of survival. But we also learned something else. We learned mercy. We learned that even in war, we have choices. We could have exterminated the Dalrith completely. We had the weapons. We had the justification. Instead, we chose to save their civilians when their own emperor was willing to let them die. That choice defines us, not the weapons we've built, not the battles we won, but the moment when we could have become monsters and chose to remain human. The crowd listened in silence. Among them were Dalrith refugees who had been saved from Dalrithos, species who had suffered under Dalrith rule and had been liberated, humans who had lost everything and somehow found the strength to rebuild. After the ceremony, Xuanwu and Nari walked through the rebuilt streets of Seoul with their newly adopted daughter. She was a war orphan they had found in one of the refugee centers. She smiled and laughed as they walked, unaware of the horror that had created the world she lived in. "Do you think she'll ever understand what happened?" Nari asked. "Someday," Hyanwu replied, "when she's ready. We'll tell her about the attack, about the war, about the choices we made, and we'll teach her to be better than we were. Can we be better? We have to be. That's the only way any of this means something." 10 years after the invasion, humanity had spread to dozens of star systems. Earth's population had recovered. The scars of war were fading, though they would never disappear completely. The peacekeeping force kept order across multiple sectors. Intervening in conflicts and protecting the weak, the galaxy had learned to respect Earth. Some species admired humanity's resilience and compassion. Others feared their capacity for destruction. Most felt a mixture of both. But everyone understood that humanity was now a major power. Attacking them would be catastrophic. The Dalrith species survived, scattered across hundreds of worlds. They rebuilt their society without the empire, without the conquest, without the arrogance that had defined them for millennia. Some humans could never forgive them. Others worked to help them heal. It was complicated, messy, and imperfect. But it was better than extinction. Admiral Taiyang, now retired and teaching at the military academy, gave one final interview before he passed away peacefully at the age of 87. "People asked me if it was worth it," he said. "If winning the war justified what we did. I don't know how to answer that. We did what we had to do to survive. We made choices that haunt us. We became something we never wanted to be. But we also chose mercy when it mattered most. We became protectors instead of conquerors. That has to count for something. Do you do it differently if you could go back?" He thought about that for a long time. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward and try to be better than we were. That's all anyone can do." Secretary General Kuhn, now in her 70s, stood before the Galactic Council one final time before retiring. She looked at the assembled representatives and spoke with quiet pride. "When the Dalrith attacked Earth, they expected us to break, to surrender, to die quietly. Instead, we fought back with everything we had. We did terrible things. We crossed lines that should never be crossed. We learned to hate and to destroy. But we also learned to forgive, to help to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. We learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty, that power without restraint is just tyranny. Humanity will never forget what happened to us. We will never be defenseless again. But we will also never become what the Dalrith were. We will defend ourselves, yes. But we will also defend others. We will be strong, yes. But we will also be kind. That is our promise to the galaxy. That is our legacy. The council chamber erupted in applause. Not everyone agreed with humanity's actions during the war. Not everyone approved of their military strength or their willingness to use it. But everyone respected what they had become. Earth's sun rose over Sol, just as it had for billions of years. The city below was alive with activity. Humans and aliens working together, building together, living together. The scars were still visible if you knew where to look. But new life grew around them, through them, despite them. In a classroom, Doyen taught engineering to students from a dozen different species. In a hospital, Minjin worked with war orphans, helping them heal. In an intelligence office, Sora monitored the galaxy for threats while making sure human power wasn't abused. In a government building, Salman negotiated treaties that protected the weak, and in space. The Remembrance patrolled the trade routes commanded by Captain Hannah, ready to defend. Ready to help? Ready to prove that humanity's victory over the Dalrith meant something more than just survival. They had been attacked. They had fought back. They had declared war and won it at terrible cost. But they had also chosen, in the end, to be better than their enemies. To use their strength to protect rather than conquer. To remember the past while building a better future. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was human. And in the end, that was enough.